Archaeologist Jago Cooper has come here to investigate one of the most spectacular climate disasters in human history. The river system Jago's on is the first clue as to what happened. It's the remnant of a vast lake that dominated northern Canada. Just how big the lake was is clearer from the air.
This lake was just huge. It was the size of California.
Patrick Lajeunesse has been piecing the evidence here together to better understand the climate event that took place.
Looking at it from the air, as far as we can see here, this would all have been water.
All this area, everything that you can see here was covered by the lake.
So we've been standing here, there's been an enormous lake spread out in the distance, and this ice dam would have been preventing that water from going out.
Yeah, there was this big ice dam right there.
And how high would that have been? It would have been right up
a few
there.
hundred meters.
Huge. And we'd have seen it stretching for miles all the way along.
Oh, hundreds of miles.
And there'd been ice going off it?
You would have some big pieces of ice that were dropping down, then going in the lake to form icebergs. It's exactly what you see now in Antarctica or Greenland.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we had at the edge of the glacier there.
To find out what happened to Lake Agassiz when it did, Patrick and his colleague Guillaume used sonar to map the contours on the other side of the ice dam under the Hudson Bay.
And so what do these images show us?
Well, the images here, they show us large dunes we call sand waves. And you can imagine sand waves like being desert dunes, similar to the ones we can see now in the Sahara Desert. And they can reach like 3, 4, and even 10 meters high and tens and tens of meters of width.
What do they tell us about the nature of the drainage of the lake?
Well, since dunes are produced by currents, they show us that these sand waves were built by the high-energy currents under the ice sheet when actually the lake drained below the ice.
To discover more about its origins, archaeologist Jago Cooper has come to its first capital. It's called Hierakonpolis. When it was built nearly 6,000 years ago, it was unlike anything else on the planet. It was one of the world's first cities.
So here we are in this incredible mud brick building. Tell me what it's called.
Well, we call it the fort, but it's really officially the ceremonial enclosure of King Kuckelman, which is a mouthful, which is why we call it the fort. It's the oldest freestanding mud brick structure in the world. It was built at about 2700 BC. It's estimated to take 4 million bricks just to build this one.
And what a statement it must have been.
It would have been an amazing landmark, and it still is today.
The fort stands at the centre of an extraordinary complex of structures, including the remains of a temple, workshops and houses.
Do we have any idea of population numbers?
Well, people have estimated anywhere from 500, which is way too small, to 100,000, which is way too big. I would estimate 10,000, 20,000 people.
But it's not just the city's scale that's significant. So too is what went on inside it. These are the remains of a brewery. One of the earliest examples anywhere in the world of large-scale industry.
These are these giant vats where they boiled up the grain to make what's called the wort. And they took this liquid and they transferred it over there for fermentation.
So there are two separate activity areas.
And then a third activity area is here. This is where they were making the beer jars to put it all in.
Fantastic. So how are these vats? Any idea of the volume they might have held?
Well, we're estimating, 300, 400 gallons. Just look at the size of them. I mean, you can see that there were originally 6 of them. So you're making almost 1,000 gallons of beer in every process.
And it's not just beer. There's evidence here of the industrial production of pottery, building materials and tools.
We're seeing a very organized, sophisticated society where you have beer being made by specialists, you have specialist production of pottery, everyone has their place in society and everyone's working together to make sure that it works.
So Hierakonpolis really represents that start of the stratified society. It really starts out here and it's something which is built on over time.
Yes, I think this is the beginning of Egyptian civilization, right here.
Archaeologist Jago Cooper has come to Colorado to investigate. Today, like Jago, you can drive for hours round here without seeing a soul. But 700 years ago, this landscape would have been teeming with life. This is Mesa Verde in Colorado. In its heyday between AD 1150 and 1250, more than 3,000 people would have lived here.
What's this here?
These round structures are called kivas.
And what sort of activities do you think might have been carried out in this sort of structure?
Well, we think that there were, rituals, maybe.
Jago has met up with site curator Julie Bell to help him to find his way around this extraordinary city.
A lot of people lived here. We've got 23 kivas and about 150 rooms.
Julie shows him workshops, houses, palaces, even whole villages. It's an extraordinary feat of engineering.
So this is the tower.
Oh, fantastic.
But the Cliff City is only a part of the ancestral Puebloan story. Because around it, for miles in each direction, the landscape is packed with the remains of ancient villages and settlements. Like this one.
So this sort of everyday living area on top of the Mesa, they could have stretched a long way. Have you got any idea of population size?
Looking at the whole archaeological occupation of this area, we estimate about 50,000 people lived in what is now Montezuma County. Today, about 25,000 people live in that same county. So prehistorically, this area accommodated a lot more people than it does now.
All this allowed them to lead a remarkably rich and sophisticated lifestyle. This is a shoe, ingeniously woven from yucca strands, like hemp.
That's quite nice. And we've got some lovely ceramics over here.
Yes, Mesa Verde is very famous for its black and white pottery. This came into production a little bit later in the occupation.
And just over there, what's that?
This is what we call cordage or rope. They would weave yucca fibers into a twine. Many uses for this. We find snares that would have been used to capture small game. Could be used as baskets, also actually as ropes to lower and raise things.
Remarkably, archaeologist Kristin Kuckelman has found a number of clues. All in one village, just a few miles from Mesa Verde. In some of the houses, she's found evidence of the pre-drought diet. Turkeys, corn and maize. All produced by farming. But a few years into the drought, and everything's changed.
That's a humerus of a red fox. And we also have leg bones of a coyote.
So essentially these are wild animals as opposed to the domesticated turkeys.
Exactly. And that indicates that the turkey flocks were no longer viable, were not sustaining them anymore, and they were forced to look for some other source of sustenance.
How would you characterize that change?
Well, it's a very clear change from an agricultural or horticultural lifestyle to hunting and gathering. You can actually see some charcoal here. There's some burned adobe here. It's part of the roofing material or part of the wall. It's been burned.
The landscape around here is littered with the remains of houses like this one that have been torched.
We're pretty sure they were set on fire intentionally by the people who lived in them, as a ritual type of closing of the houses.
So this kiva, then, you think we're seeing some signs of abandonment?
They would have lived here in this kiva maybe 10 years, maybe 15 at the outside, and then drought hit, and they would have burned their structures, probably as some sort of a ritual event, and headed out of the entire region.
So it must have been quite an emotional time then. They were burning down their houses knowing that they'd be moving on.
Yes, I think it was a time of great strife, not only leaving these particular structures, but knowing that they were leaving here for the last time as well.